Hello. You may or may not have noticed because this is clearly a voiceover, but when I was filming this footage, I completely forgot to turn on my microphone. And I thought I looked cute in my crazy, over-the-top pink look, and so I was not willing to lose the footage I spent a couple of hours filming. So I'm doing a voiceover. In this video, I'm going to ask you to not make fun of or roast my very over-the-top and not incredibly well-done makeup look, because I like the way it looks anyway. Thanks, leave me alone. I'm also going to be talking about my favorite books of all time. And by books, I mean classics and 3 series. Because I'm a predictable bitch. 4 of them are classics, 3 of them are fantasy series, because that's all I read. Don't come for me. I'm going to talk about them in the order that I read them, as opposed to the order that I like them, or the order that they were published or something. Because I didn't really want to look up when each of these books was published, so that I would make sure they were in proper chronological order. Also, I would not expect me to be able to match up with my lips or what I'm saying in the video at all. So the video clips are just for you to look at. Thanks. The first book I read that has stuck with me and that I love very, very much is Dracula. Woo! Dracula was a book recommended to me when I was in 8th grade by my 8th grade English teacher. I had just read Twilight, and she, being the sneaky little devil that she is, was like, vampires, you'll like Dracula. Now, for those of you who don't know, Dracula is not an easy book. Nor is it exactly, 13-year-old girl friendly. This is not exactly a book I would recommend to a 13-year-old who just read Twilight and thought that was like the bee's knees. But I read it anyway at age 13. Half of the content went completely over my head, but then I reread it in high school, fell in love with it all over again, and the rest is history. The next book I read, standalone classic, that meant a lot to me, but not the first time I read it, was Frankenstein. I read this for the first time in high school in my sophomore year, and I hated it the first time. I think this is a pretty common thing for people who read books, like especially classics in high school, but I hated it for God knows what reason, and I think any of my high school English teachers would have been baffled by this decision. But I decided to get an English degree in college, despite being a pretty terrible student in English classes in high school. And obviously I had to read Frankenstein again. It's pretty standard in most English literature college degree programs. It's pretty much a staple of British literature. So I read it again, and rereading it again in college was like having a veil lifted from my eyes and angels singing from above and proclaiming the wonders that are Mary Shelley. She is everything to me. Frankenstein is one of the best books I've ever read, and if I had to pick an absolute favorite classic of all time, this would be it. If you read Frankenstein once already and hated it, maybe give it another shot. It is incomparable in how layered and deep and meaningful and dark and gritty, but also light and overwhelming. I cannot talk highly enough about this book. The next book I read was also a college read, because like I said, I was a terrible English student in high school and read very few books, but when I got to college and had to read books for my degree, although sometimes people would tell me to read books and then I didn't, sometimes I would, and one of those books that I did actually read when it was assigned to me was Jane Eyre, and oh boy, am I glad that I did. Jane Eyre was one of those books that revitalized my love for English literature. Charlotte Bronte really knew what she was doing. She did that for us. I understand why some people don't like it. The end It's not kind of the end most modern readers would want out of the book. It's something most modern readers are going to hate, but if you know anything about British literature from the 19th century, it was the only real ending that book could have had for the time it was written in. And because of that, I sort of just accept it for what it is. A terrible ending to a really fantastic book. Just know, going into this book, you are going to love it for 95% of it, and then you'll get to the end, and you'll want to throw it against a wall. But if you take the time and just pretend like the ending doesn't happen, this book is a masterpiece. If you like kind of dark and gritty books, maybe even like thriller type things, I think, and you really want to start getting into classic literature, Gothic novels are the place to start. Jane Eyre is obviously a Gothic novel, that's why I'm mentioning this when I'm talking about Jane Eyre. So if you like a good thriller, I would expect you'll like Jane Eyre, especially the middle part where she's a governess. It is just riveting, fascinating, blood-pounding, exciting, layered. And then, if you really like it, reading criticism on it afterwards is just like... My last classic was one that somehow I did not read until I got to my master's program, and if I can say there was one thing that came out of that program that was good, it was the fact that I finally read Jane Austen. And that might have been the only good thing about it. But I will say I'm thankful for having finally read Jane Austen, and now I've read everything she's ever written. And I can tell you that Pride and Prejudice is one of my favorite classics of all time. Now, this isn't technically my favorite Jane Austen novel, but I think this is the one that most people will like the best. And this is the one that really changed the way I looked at literature that followed, because it is so obviously the originator of one of the most prominent and overused tropes in particularly YA literature. And it is so funny to me to see where it came from and then compare it to where it is today. Y'all done messed up what my girl Jane set out to start. Anyway, Elizabeth Bennet is probably one of the best heroines ever committed to paper, and Mr. Darcy is pretty swell. He's no Mr. Knightley, but he's okay. And Pride and Prejudice has just revolutionized the way I read romance tropes from here on out, because, Jane really did that for us. She came for us, started at a whole new trope, whole new genre, whole new type of man for us to thirst after, and it's that kind of a jerk rich guy with a heart of gold. That's Mr. Darcy, except actually done well, and he's the OG. So if you like that trope at all, read Pride and Prejudice. Now my next three are series, and they are all fantasy because that's a shock to literally no one. And the first series in my list of favorite fantasy series is literally, none of these are going to be a shock to anyone, but the first one I read was Harry Potter. And like literally everyone else and their mom and their little sister and their dog, I love Harry Potter. Harry Potter meant a lot to me when I was growing up. It got me through a lot of really bad bullying and just all the hard times I had growing up, and made me love reading and love writing and love fantasy. And so I really have a lot to thank JK for. I know that people like to talk smack about her nowadays, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm very thankful for her and the series that she wrote, and no one can ever take that away from me. Okay, thank you. The next series is the next one I read. I didn't read it until college. Technically, I don't even know if I would call this a series. It's like a body of work. And to no surprise to anybody in the whole world, that is Lord of the Rings, or, anything written by Tolkien. I have a tattoo that is Tolkien related. I love everything about him. He is the reason that the fantasy genre is what it is today. Like, you gotta respect the man for putting in the work and giving us all one of the best genres of all time. Or revitalizing it, renewing it, whatever you want to say. Fantasy is the way it is today because of Tolkien, and y'all who want to diss him really need to reconsider yourselves. I will be the first to say it's not perfect. Nothing is. But it is absolutely amazing. The friendships are one of a kind. The storyline is amazing. He is so beyond creative, and I just always love getting a peep into his mind because it's just indescribable how incredible it is to think about all he had going on up there and thinking about and everything he had planned and all of that from a world building perspective, from someone who loves world building and who also does world building. It is just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Tolkien, thank you for everything you've done for me and fantasy. Thanks, okay. And the final series, I swear to God, if any of you are actually shocked by this, it's because you've never seen a video on my channel before, and that is the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. The books are very large, so I'm only going to hold up the first one. But oh my God, do I love this series. This is, for some reason, the first book I read by Brandon. I mean, I know why. Somebody recommended it to me who I had met through my love of Lord of the Rings. So he knew that I really liked high fantasy, and so I could jump right into hit Brandon fantasy with his big epic novels. But if that's not you, I wouldn't recommend starting here. Start maybe with like Mistborn or one of his standalones. But if you're really, really into fantasy, specifically high fantasy, and you're already fairly well versed with adult fantasies, you're fine. Start here. You'll thank me later. Because it doesn't make any of the other series or books feel worse. Like, this is my favorite one, but I'm going back and reading everything else he's written, and it's still amazing and incredible. So it's not like you're doing yourself any disservice by doing so. And Brandon, if you're listening or watching or know about me at all, ever, one point in the future, just know that you've changed my life and my writing style for the better. And I'm very thankful for you and everything you've done for the fantasy genre. Okay, so that is all I've got. I truly cannot really remember what I said when I was filming this audio, so I just sort of tried to sum up what my general thoughts are about these books. The opinions are going to be the same. I'm going to feel the same way about these books no matter when I say what I want to say. So I'm sorry that the audio is clearly not going to match up with my mouth at all. But I didn't want to sacrifice this footage and have to refilm it all. So bear with me. Okay, thanks. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.